Let's spend 30 minutes with BMAI's 60-Minute Man. Who is he? You'll meet him coming up next on Carolina People. Good morning. Welcome to Carolina People. This morning we're at the Myrtle Beach Train Depot, right here in the heart of Myrtle Beach. We're focused on Beach Music Association International, and we're visiting with its co-founder and president, Harry Turner. Good morning, Harry.
How are you, buddy?
Great to
already been out walking this morning.
I bet, early on. That's right, now at 7 a.m. on a Tuesday morning.
It's nice and cool. Absolutely.
Yeah, what a great opportunity. What about this train depot?
Oh,
this place is amazing.
I think it's great, and what Jack Thompson and his cronies did to keep this thing from being demolished is just.
Right.
What a place. And I've been to several drop-ins here. I mean,
oh, yeah, sure.
Perfect.
Jack will be with us this Friday.
Oh, good.
To highlight what that was like when the bulldozer was coming up.
And he climbed up on it and stuff.
Oh, yeah, all these folks out here that have really made a difference. The All Aboard Committee. This place is beautiful. Folks ought to come and rent this out more often to have get-togethers. You can see everything. I mean, it's just incredible.
He'll probably tell you he wished he'd done the same thing when the Ocean Forest was demolished.
Yeah.
I think that's part of what spurred him saying, by gosh, this ain't going to happen.
Yeah, I will ask him about that on Friday. That's great. BMAI, a lot happening right now. Y'all had tremendously successful Beach Music Days again this May.
We really did. It's been really a great year for us. We've expanded. We're doing things, and we have contacts in other cities, Las Vegas, Pittsburgh, New York, Chicago, Atlanta.
Right.
We're working on getting we already did the first. It took place here in the Carolinas. We have another schedule for Pittsburgh, a Beach Music Meet Doo-Wop series.
Yeah.
We had Beach Music's Fantastic Shakers, and then Doo-Wop's The Skyliners, Since I Don't Have You, play at the Newberry Opera House up in Newberry on the 26th of January, something like that.
Great.
Tremendous success. And so many of these musics do have kinship, and yet they're kind of limited to their small areas of the country. Whereas if it's exposed, people realize, oh, I love this stuff. And that's what we're trying to do. It's South Carolina's official popular music.
Yes.
And it really is one of our great tourist attractions, if you want to say it that way.
Oh, yeah.
You think of attractions as being a building like this, but in reality there's a certain mystique and something about the Carolinas that beach music puts in the minds of people in a positive way, and they smile, they laugh, they want to dance, and it's part of what can help draw them here. You know? So look at the SOS thing up at North Myrtle Beach.
Oh, yeah.
There are probably 10,000, 20,000 people between the two events every year. Well, actually, have more than two. But they come, and basically it is beach music and shagging, and there's just a specialness to all of that in the Carolinas, plus the beautiful Carolina lifestyle.
Oh, yeah.
and the coast here, and it's just what a combination.
For you, Harry, and of course I'm sure a lot of folks think about this, and obviously we want to focus on BMAI and what Beach Music Association International is doing, but when we think about beach music, is there ever a debate as to what were some of the early songs or how they came up with the phrase beach music? Obviously for yourself, having taught a lot about music history and otherwise, just how did the term beach music come about?
Beach music is a combination of doo-wop, Motown, soul, the blues, good time rock and roll, oldies, American music. The British invasion stuff and after, that's never been a part of beach music. It's about American, basically black-based rhythm and blues. At the same time, other parts of the country were doing and loving and going to concerts and dancing to the same music.
Right.
Now, I'm going to give you two examples because it happened about the same time. Doo-wop. Doo-wop is hot. I mean, it's really hot. These PBS specials on doo-wop, which is nothing more than a lot of beach music. 60-Minute Man, the most popular song of all time, is a doo-wop song, as an example. And these doo-wop specials are the biggest shows in the history of public television. But doo-wop was not called doo-wop until late 60s, early 70s, something like that. Nor was beach music called beach music until about the same time.
Is that right?
Yeah, and what I try to explain to people is beach music, to people that don't know, the simplest way to explain it is beach music is that rhythm and blues music that you could listen and dance to when you came to the beach. Because if you lived in the larger cities, I lived in Greenville, large enough to bring in shows where you see these national artists performing these rhythm and blues hits.
Right.
But if you didn't live in Greenville, Charlotte, Columbia, Greensboro, or someplace like that, Raleigh, you wouldn't hear this kind of music on the radio or at these concerts.
Is that right?
Unless you had a chance to come down here, where the jukeboxes were full of this music. Plus, in the 60s, then the Beach Club opened up and brought in a lot of these entertainers, you see. So that's how it kind of came about. Then when you had the amalgam, basically speaking, you got to remember, original beach music, though, I think I may have told you this before, but it wasn't, you didn't just shag to it. The shag is the state dance of South Carolina, beach music's official popular music. But beach music has a lot of songs that you didn't shag to. It was up-tempo, slow stuff. You know, we love the hugging and lovey-dovey stuff, you know.
Right.
But when the shag kind of regenerated itself in the late 70s through SOS and what have you, it became somewhat synonymous that beach music and the shag were the same thing, which really they aren't, because now they're shagging to a lot of non-beach music as well as beach music.
Right.
That's part of why we had to form that association. But the name and title beach music had been there for about, we formed it in the early 90s.
Right.
So it had been so called for almost 20 years, or maybe a little longer. You see. The biggest negative is we do have people that don't know, and we have to explain this. They think it's the Beach Boys, Jan and Dean, the Safaris, that West Coast beach sound, because of the exposure through Hollywood and TV out there and that
Great
kind of
point,
thing.
sure.
Yeah. So we have to make that delineation.
And what kind of music are they, the Beach Boys, for instance?
Well, believe it or not,
put them in?
The Beach Boys, in the earliest days, did some of this kind of music, the doo-wop R&B type sounds. Their influences were a lot of the black R&B groups, as well as, believe it or not, a big band type group called the Four Freshmen, you see. But what happened as they grabbed onto a gimmick, which was the surf thing,
right.
then they became basically a surfing band talking about, you know, singing about that kind of stuff rather than just singing songs themselves, you see.
Sure. That's very interesting. I bet that is a big misconception to get over.
Well, let me give you an example, something you may not know. I guess I'm digressing a little bit, but the Beach Boys had great harmony. They did a song called Little Surfer Girl, if you ever get a chance to hear it. The harmony is just beautiful. But let me tell you what they did, and it took it away from the original beach music sound that we love so much. A lot of what was so great about those groups back in the 50s and 60s were those great bass voices.
Right.
You can hear it now, the great harmonies that melded together. Well, the Beach Boys had a bass singer too, but their bass was really a baritone. He wasn't didn't have a deep bass voice. Now, what happened off of that is that basically with the success of the Beach Boys, because they were such a phenomenal success, the groups that then would copy them would not use a bass anymore, they'd use a baritone. The reason is that there is a perception, wrongly so, that if you got a real deep bass voice, you're an older group. So they're going after teenagers and sub-teen white females for the most part.
Interesting.
So you want to sound as young as you can, even though Frankie Lyman and the Teenagers, Why Do Fools Fall in Love, Jimmy Merchant, their bass singer, had this beautiful deep bass voice. So it was really a misnomer. But that's a little aside. But that was a little bit of the differentiation, because our beach music is basically the R&B groups and white groups too, that had those deep bass voices and the great harmonies and the great tenors and the whole 9 yards.
Very interesting, Harry. I'm glad you shared that. Of course, again, I know much of our focus is on the Beach Music Association International. Obviously, we wanted to talk a little about the Beach Music Days and what prompted the founding of those. And you highlighted the success of those. We also had very recently the loss of a true great performer. I know you were one of the 5 featured speakers at his funeral.
Yeah.
Share with viewers a little bit about Bill Pinkney and, of course, his funeral, which was held last month.
Well, Bill, of course, was the co-founder of the Drifters. He was 81 years old. And he was, the song he's most recognized for worldwide is White Christmas. The second best-selling version of White Christmas was, that's Bill singing bass lead. Be-doo, be-doo, dope, dope. I know you've heard it. It was also on the soundtrack of the movie Home Alone. It's kind of the theme song of that movie.
Right.
And it really revived interest in that sound. But Bill was, he was a trooper. He almost married Della Reese, Ruth Brown. He was quite the ladies' man, but always he was kind of the glue that held the original Drifters together. When the Drifters were fired in the late 50s because they wanted more of a say-so in the music and how they got paid, the royalties and what have you. You know, back then they didn't have much leverage, and the record company people just fired them and hired another group totally, who went on to have other hit records under the name of the Drifters too. But Bill kept that original sound, that original group going. Of course, he was living in New York at the time.
Is that right?
He's from Sumter,
But he still
Dalzell, right
kept
outside Sumter.
right,
Yeah.
right.
And eventually, after a couple of years in Atlanta, he moved back and spent the last, say, 25, 30 years of his life
Right.
back in his home state of South Carolina.
Right.
And through that time, Bill arguably became the most well-loved entertainer in South Carolina. A couple of governors have named him the official ambassador of music before he
Is
passed.
that
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
I didn't know that.
And Bill was a member of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the Rhythm and Blues Hall of Fame, the Beach Music Hall of Fame, the Doo-Wop Hall of Fame, the Vocal Group Hall of Fame, the Group Harmony Hall of Fame, the Gospel Hall of Fame.
Wow.
He got letters of commendation from Bill Clinton, Nelson Mandela, people like this. He received a doctorate from Coastal Carolina University, an honorary doctorate of fine arts, arts and letters, something of that nature.
Right.
He was just one of these people, but he was also a giving person. When the mayor of Sumter spoke at his funeral, his voice cracked because Bill was Sumter. I mean, Bill, not just the famous entertainer, but he did things like he bought a school bus in his 70s now. All right, he bought a school bus. You know why? So he could take the old folks around to shop and go to the doctors. And he personally, in his 70s, I said, Bill, what do you do? Well, somebody's got to take the old folks around. I said, well, Bill, you in your 70s. Well, I know, but I can get around and they can't. I mean, that's the kind of person he was.
That's tremendous.
A policeman in Sumter was shot and killed in the line of duty. And they wanted to do something really special for his funeral because, you know, when you have a policeman killed, it's always a really big deal at the funeral. So they called Bill, and he was in Los Angeles at the time. Told him what happened. Bill canceled his date there, flew himself and the Drifters back, sang for free at this funeral, and then of course flew back to L.A. or didn't cancel or postpone for the rest of the engagement.
Wow.
And he just did these selfless things, you know, all the time. And see, the irony is, he was always part of why we formed our associations. He was with us right from the very start.
Is that right?
Well, oh yeah.
With you and Hilda, Billy, and Representative Bubber Snow.
He and Maurice Williams were the two other entertainers that were so much a part of it.
Right.
But Bill was working on celebrating his 82nd birthday. Our association helped him celebrate his birthday every year.
Right.
And I'd been invited to see him that Friday night before he died on Wednesday at the Alabama Theater. He's standing ovations. I mean, his usual great show.
Had great shots in Hilda's column and around town. Yeah.
And the ironies were that I was going to be seeing him that afternoon to talk about his birthday while he was here in some hotel room in Myrtle Beach. But Hilda, because she has trouble getting around, as you know, she said, Harry, I'd like to go see the Coaster Drifters Platters. Do you mind taking me to, because she doesn't like, especially at night, doesn't like to drive.
Right.
And so what I did, I said, all right, I'll do it. So, because I always go at least once a year to see him anyway, because I had represented Bill all those years too.
Sure.
So I went and got Hilda and had a great time that night, and I rescheduled to see him going through on the way to the upstate, to Columbia and upstate in Sumter on Monday at his home. So I'm so glad I did, because not only did I see his next to his last performance, but I also visited with him at his home that Monday before he died on Wednesday.
Wow.
Talking about his birthday.
Preparing for his birthday party.
And I want to pass on to your viewers. He always gets these standing ovations. I mean, these people just loved him.
Right.
And, you know, I said, well, Bill, Friday night you did your usual thing. You got 4 or 5 standing ovations. And he says, Harry, he says, I think the people love me, don't they? I said, well, Bill, I think they do. He says, do you know why? I said, well, I think I have an idea. He says, well, I'll tell you why. He says, because they know I love them.
Right.
And it came across. I mean, Bill was that kind of performer, that kind of entertainer. And that funeral was attended, I'm guessing, by 5,000 people. I mean,
really?
National entertainers, politicians from all over. There were only 5 of us scheduled to speak. And then they brought up 15 politicians just to introduce them. And somebody, I don't know if it was purposely done or not, said, the first one, would you like to say a word? Well, guess what? All 15 politicians spoke on top of the 5 of us. And the music, the singing was just Ollie Woodson of the Temptations sang the song. And Benny King of the Stand By Me. He was there, a whole bunch of people like this.
Wow, really?
It was a big event. And I've known all along, probably when Bill died, because we were so close, I'd have to speak. And it's one of the toughest things that I've ever imagined having to do. But really, I got with Bill's sister the night before, we decided, she said, Harry, you know, you emceed Bill, introduced Bill more than any other single person.
Right.
And he always liked you to do it because you gave his history. He liked that. He liked people to know his history. Would you consider introducing Bill and the Original Drifters one more time when you speak?
Wow.
So that's what we did. You know, of course, I told some of the anecdotes and stories and some of his history and stuff. But then I asked all the entertainers to stand. And, you know, I then did, you know, the usual thing I do in introducing him, and then ran through about 30 Drifters hits, just reeled them off.
Right.
And then, I said, this is a celebration, because Bill was ready to go. I mean, his attitude was great. You know, I mean, he was right with the Lord the whole bit. He was there. I said, so this is a celebration. I said, that's how I'm able to get through it. So when I started doing it, and finally I said, and now, ladies and gentlemen, Bill Pinkney and the Original Drifters. Just as I said the word Drifters, my voice broke just a little bit because I realized it'd be the last time.
Yeah.
And then I just walked off the stage, and there were all those entertainers standing there. It was a real.
Boy, that's powerful.
Yeah, it was something, and you know, I'll miss it. But probably no death since my dad's 20 years ago has affected me more than Bill, because I've represented him on and off, and we've been friends for 30-something years.
Right.
You know,
right.
and you know that Bill Pinkney, no longer will I be able to call and talk, talk to Bill, or vice versa. And,
sure.
Oh yeah. You know, but he was truly special. You had the opportunity to meet him, and you remember.
I did. I interviewed him in Florence at up at the Shaw studio. Up there preparing for the Long Bay Symphony's piece.
And you remember what a performance he put on with that Long Bay Symphony.
He and
Maurice Williams and Billy Scott.
And of course, Billy Scott. All three of them did a tremendous job, along with the Long Bay Symphony. They really did a crackerjack.
And the dancers
so hard
well.
to put it together.
That's right.
Loved being up there, and you had lined up some amazing folks. You and Hilda both had lined up some great folks from all over.
Oh yeah.
Who were with us that week we filmed there at the Fred Shaw studio.
That's
there
right.
in Florence, and of course Bill was one of them, and Maurice and Billy was there.
Right.
We had everyone. You had folks in from all over.
Well, you know, as I say, you've done a lot to support beach music as well, and we certainly appreciate that.
Oh, well, I just loved a couple of years ago when Alan Clemens presented me with the Hilda Carter Award.
I know.
Which was a tremendous honor to get that, and of course, I believe Alan may have gotten in the past. I know Cecil.
No,
Chandler.
Alan's
always presented.
He received the Carol Campbell Award.
The Carol Campbell
at our
Award.
South Carolina Beach Music Day, which goes to a non-industry or media person that's done a lot to help promote the music. Our winner this past year was Gilda Cobb Hunter.
Right.
Orangeburg, who'd be another good guest for you sometime.
Oh, yeah,
she's
I'd love to get her
quite
in.
a character.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I'll suggest that.
Talk to her about that, Harry. And of course, we've had, I know you honored Joe Penner, Cecil Chandler.
The same award you won, Joe and Cecil won, and you know, it's a group named after Hilda Carter, of course.
Absolutely.
From
Hilda, who co-founded Beach Music Association International with you, and Representative Bubba Snow. And of course, Billy Scott, who's been instrumental. We haven't seen Billy this year since we started the show back up, back in January.
I need to tell him to give you a buzz, and let's get that done.
We need to get Billy down. Of course, we tried to interview Maurice Williams last week, but he had a performance and couldn't get together with us. We're prayerfully hopeful to get him in.
Yeah, he'll come back. He'll work it out. Yeah.
And Maurice lives in the Charlotte area.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
There's some great, and of course, you've got some clients in the PD as well, Harry.
Well, I have clients all over.
Oh yeah,
both Carolinas, and I've got one in Pittsburgh and places like this. But basically speaking, still my office is here, and I do more here than any single place.
Sure.
Now, the one thing's going to be interesting. You remember the movie Dirty Dancing?
Yes, Dirty Dancing, of course, with Jennifer Grey and Patrick Swayze.
Exactly. And the guy that was on Law and Order. The cop that everybody knows, I can't think of his name, that died about 6 months or a year ago. He was Jennifer Grey's father in that movie. Anyway, it was filmed, most of it, at Lake Lure, North Carolina.
Oh, yeah.
See, I have some clients up in that area, too.
Sure.
And they stayed at a place called the Lake Lure Inn, and the fellow that owned it became a friend of mine. He owned also the land and the buildings where all the dancing scenes, everything was filmed.
Wow. And
so he started to bring people up to Lake Lure, doing a Dirty Dancing review, bringing in a lot of the artists whose music were on the soundtrack, or that Maurice is one of them. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I was the MC of all those shows. In fact, I used to DJ some, and I DJ'd the cast party of the debut,
is that
whatever you call it, the first movie showing
came out.
The premiere. And we thought at that time it's just going to be this little kind of fun type movie, not knowing that a few years back they did a thing about the great chick flicks, and that finished #1 on the thing.
Did Dirty Dancing in that? Wow.
Yeah, that survey. So anyway, make a long story short, because of that, I've contacted John, who owned it. He now lives in Florida.
Right.
And we're going to do a 20th anniversary, because it was released in '87.
Right.
A 20th anniversary Dirty Dancing salute with Maurice Williams and the Zodiac, some of the cast dancers, some of the cast members.
Tremendous.
At a place called Saluda Mountain Jamboree, right off Interstate 26 in Saluda, North Carolina. It's the first exit as you go up into North Carolina.
Right.
After you've come through Spartanburg and what have you.
Sure, sure.
So, and our association will be involved with that. So we're pretty much spread.
Involved. That's true. If a viewer wanted to learn more about that, could they give you a call, Harry?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Great. What's the best number? And that's a great question. If someone wanted to learn more about BMAI or about that 20th anniversary Dirty Dancing party, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
All right, 843.
Right.
280. 4809.
Okay, 280-4809 or bmai.net.
.net, exactly.
Great information.
And there's a place you
there.
can hit there for email and what have you.
Oh yeah, to send you an email.
Yeah.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. Well, you know, there's so much that happens, and you've been involved in so much. You know, the ability to highlight you as an instructor, having been an instructor and teaching there.
Be starting again, by the way, in September.
Oh, you're starting
this time
next
we're going to
month.
do. They've rented or have a place up at North Myrtle Beach. See what they've done. They're taking it to the community.
Yes.
The first ones, few I did, were at the main campus.
Right.
Yeah, at Conway, but they started moving it to because there's a lot of distance between, say, Little River and Georgetown and then to Conway and what have you. So they're trying to take it to them. So this one I'll be doing in North Myrtle Beach.
Tremendous.
Not sure the location, but they can call the same number and find out about that too.
Okay. How exciting, Harry.
Yeah.
Of course, the success of the Beach Music Days on May 15th in Columbia and then May 22nd in Raleigh. This is your second or third year. Elaine Marshall, I believe, North Carolina's Secretary of State. Is she on your board?
She's on our board.
Sure,
be another good guest for you sometime too.
We'd like to get her in. We also get you lining up more. You and Sherry can team up on that. I like that, Harry.
We also have Nick Theodore, who was the former lieutenant governor for 8 years.
Of course.
On our board. He also would be a great guest for you.
Absolutely.
But we did, the 15th was in Columbia on the State House steps, and it was just great. We saluted the city of New Orleans. That was because of Katrina and the great contributions to music. We brought in Willie T., who did Walking Up a One-Way Street, Thank You, John, Teasing You. And then we brought in Herbert Hardesty, who is Fats Domino's band leader, lead saxophonist. He's 81 years old, played sax break on almost every Fats Domino hit, some of the best sax breaks in the history of music, for God's sake. And then we brought in the Dixie Cups, who did Chapel of Love, one of the great songs of all time. They're all from New Orleans, and it was kind of a thank you to New Orleans for all they've done for music, especially for Beach Music fans.
That is tremendous.
Then we did an after party that night at the Clarion Hotel, where most of them would sing with we had Fred Shaw and the Sugar Bees as the main band.
Oh yeah.
And they then kind of jammed and what have you. The North Carolina event took place on the Capitol grounds, and we brought in the Orlons, who did Don't Hang Up and Wah Wah Tootsie and those great hits in the 60s. Brought Donna Groom with the Skyliners, Since I Don't Have You. And then mainly just the regional artists, mainly South Carolina artists, and a few national artists, North Carolina artists, and a few national artists.
Right.
But the Embers are always our main band, both during the day and at night.
In North Carolina.
At a North Carolina thing. They do a great job of backing people up.
And they're based in Raleigh.
They're based in Raleigh.
Perfect for them. Sure.
And then that night we did an after party at the Sheraton downtown, the Capitol Center in Raleigh. And South Carolina was a great event, but we had a little competition. It was the evening of the first Republican debate, presidential debate in Columbia.
May 15th.
So it hurt us just a little bit, not much, but a little bit. But North Carolina, on the other hand, is the best North Carolina we've ever had.
Is that right? Great.
It was just gangbusters.
Praise the Lord.
And it was our third annual North Carolina and seventh annual South Carolina.
Harry, do you pinch yourself on a regular basis thinking about the excitement of kicking off BMAI and how you all have grown so fast?
We've come a long way.
Really made a difference in the state, of course, with Beach Music being the official music for the state, and obviously the Shag, the official dance. I mean, that's a tremendous...
Well, we've come a long way, and Greg, you've been aware of some things we've done. If we have any one problem today, it would be what happens when you grow. We're suffering growing pains. How do we now get all done? We need to get enough funding to do the things those are positive problems because it's a sign things are going well.
Absolutely. Do you all ever seek donations, Harry? Do folks ever contact you all about making donations?
We do get donations.
It's so important to get the word out.
We do get donations.
Sponsors?
We do get sponsors from time to time, yes. believe it or not, one of the organizations that Bill Pinkney's family asked that they donate to, and if people watching would like to, is to our association.
Good.
Beach Music Association International, and we've already received. Well, I got the first check in yesterday, as a matter of fact. It takes a while, for that to do. The Songwriters Association of America sent us a check.
Right.
And that address is P.O. Box 3614. North Myrtle Beach, and of course it's 29582.
Okay, great.
We do have members and we have memberships, but we're not as much a membership organization as we are a sponsor, and we get grants and those kind of things.
Right.
Because membership organizations are organizations that you give benefits to them for being members, and ours, the only benefits we really can give is maybe get you preferred seating at events and those kind of things, but there's not a whole lot that we can do otherwise. Certainly we take members.
Terribly sorry to say we've run out of time. The time is flown here on a Tuesday morning. Thank you so much for being with us.
You're welcome, buddy, as always.
Thank you. Stay tuned to more Carolina People with Harry Turner coming up next. Historian, talk show host, promoter, event manager, MC. You heard him talking about the opportunities there. Author. This is the first time we've had Harry on the show and haven't talked about this magic moment, the book he did back in 1994, and thoughts about more books in the future. It's amazing to get him on bmai.net, bmai.net. Tremendous information on there, a lot about the founding of Beach Music Association International, a lot about sponsorship opportunities. There's a piece about the Buy It, Don't Burn It campaign. There's a great sense of figuring out what's going on and the foundings of Beach Music Association International. He also gave you his number, 843-280-4809. Take the time to give him a call if you want to learn more, learn about some of the tremendous events coming up, learn about next year's Beach Music Days there in the Capitol in Columbia, as well as the Capitol in Raleigh for our viewers in the Tar Heel State. Take a little time, go online, bmai.net.